The first light of dawn crept through the pristine windows of the Riverside estate as Nathan Cross turned his key in the mahogany front door, his breath still carrying the lingering scent of Delphine's jasmine perfume. Expensive, intoxicating, the kind of fragrance that clung to a man's conscience long after he should have washed it away. He stepped inside expecting the familiar warmth of home, the soft sounds of his family beginning their morning routine, but instead, he was met with a silence so profound it felt like stepping into a tomb. The house stood eerily still. No coffee brewing in the kitchen. No gentle footsteps padding across the hardwood floors. No murmur from the television where his wife Celeste usually caught the morning news while preparing breakfast for their twin daughters, Lily and Rose. Nathan's heart began to hammer as he noticed something that made his blood turn to ice. The family photo that always sat on the entryway table was gone. In its place lay a single white envelope with his name written in Celeste's careful handwriting. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. His hands trembled as he tore it open, the paper crinkling in the oppressive quiet. The words hit him like physical blows. Nathan, we know about Delphine. We're gone. Don't try to find us. You made your choice. The note fluttered to the floor as he stumbled forward, calling out in desperation. Celeste! Girls! Please, let me explain. But his voice echoed back hollow and mocking through empty rooms that suddenly felt cavernous. He raced upstairs, taking the steps 3 at a time, his expensive Italian shoes slipping on the polished wood. The master bedroom stood pristine but wrong, like a museum display. Celeste's side of the closet gaped open, revealing empty hangers swaying slightly as if ghosts had just disturbed them. Her jewelry box sat open and barren. The photographs of their wedding day, their honeymoon in Tuscany, the girls' first steps, all gone, leaving behind only faint rectangular shadows on the wallpaper where they once hung. The twins' room delivered the cruelest blow of all. 7-year-old Lily's collection of porcelain horses had vanished from their carefully arranged shelf. 9-year-old Rose's astronomy books, the ones she treasured more than toys, were nowhere to be found. Even their stuffed animals, worn soft from years of bedtime cuddles, had disappeared. The only thing left behind was a child's drawing taped to Rose's mirror, a stick-figure family under a bright yellow sun, with "Daddy" crossed out in angry red crayon. Nathan sank to his knees on the butterfly-patterned rug the girls had begged for last Christmas, the same rug where he'd read them bedtime stories just 3 nights ago. How had they found out? How long had they known? The questions hammered against his skull as he tried to piece together the fragments of his shattered world. Had Celeste seen the hotel receipts he thought he'd hidden so carefully? Had someone spotted him and Delphine at that intimate restaurant in Millbrook? Had the girls heard something they weren't supposed to? The silence of the house pressed against him like a living thing, suffocating and relentless. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nathan Cross was a man who controlled outcomes, who managed risks for Fortune 500 companies, who built contingency plans for every possible scenario. But he'd never planned for this. He'd convinced himself that his affair with Delphine was contained, compartmentalized, invisible to the life he'd built with Celeste and their daughters. He was wrong. As he wandered through the house like a ghost haunting his own life, Nathan began to understand the meticulous precision of their departure. This wasn't a hasty escape born of sudden discovery. This was calculated, planned, executed with the same careful attention to detail that Celeste brought to everything she touched. The family calendar still hung on the kitchen wall, but all future entries had been erased. The refrigerator hummed with fresh groceries, but nothing that would spoil, as if she'd known exactly when to stop shopping for a family that would no longer exist. His phone buzzed with a text from Delphine. "Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" The words that might have thrilled him hours earlier now felt like acid burning through his chest. He stared at the message, understanding for the first time the true cost of his choices. He had traded everything: his wife's trust, his daughter's love, his family's presence, for stolen moments with a woman who knew nothing about the man he used to be when he was worthy of being called husband and father. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the empty house as Nathan Cross stood in the ruins of his former life. He had returned home expecting to slip back into his carefully constructed double existence, but instead found himself facing a future as hollow and vacant as the rooms surrounding him. His family wasn't just gone, they had vanished as completely as if they'd never existed, leaving behind only the echo of his own devastating choices and the terrible knowledge that some mistakes can never be undone. What Nathan didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. The empty house was not the end of his story, but the first domino in a chain of consequences that would strip away everything he thought he knew about himself, about love, and about what it truly means to lose everything that matters. The real reckoning was still to come. 3 hours after discovering the empty house, Nathan Cross sat in his Mercedes in the parking lot of Willow Creek Elementary, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The morning dismissal bell had rung, and parents streamed past his car, collecting their children with the casual ease of people whose worlds hadn't imploded overnight. He searched every small face that emerged from the brick building, hoping against hope to catch a glimpse of Lily's golden curls or Rose's serious brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But they never came. Nathan's phone had become his lifeline and his torment, buzzing constantly with calls he couldn't bear to answer. His assistant Miranda had left 4 increasingly frantic voicemails about the Henderson merger meeting he was supposed to lead in an hour. His business partner Derek texted asking where the hell he was. But every time Nathan tried to focus on work, on the normal rhythms of his life, the image of that empty house crashed over him like a wave, pulling him under. He drove to Celeste's sister Patricia's house in Oakwood Heights, a modest colonial where the twins often spent weekends. Patricia answered the door with her arms crossed, her usually warm demeanor replaced by an icy stare that could have frozen fire. "She's not here, Nathan," she said before he could even speak. "And even if she was, do you really think I'd tell you?" "Patricia, please," Nathan pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "I need to explain. I need to talk to my girls. They must be terrified and confused." Patricia's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Terrified? The only thing those beautiful children are terrified of is having to face their father again. Do you have any idea what Rose asked me last month? She wanted to know why Daddy was always too busy to come to her science fair, but somehow had time to take business trips every other weekend." Nathan felt his stomach lurch. She knew. Children aren't stupid, Nathan. They see everything, even when we think they don't. Patricia stepped closer, lowering her voice to a fierce whisper. "Lily has been drawing pictures of families with only mommy and children. Rose stopped talking about you in show and tell. They've been watching their father disappear long before Celeste caught you with that woman." The word "caught" hit Nathan like a physical blow. How did she find out? Patricia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Does it matter? The fact is, she did. And now she's protecting her children from a man who chose another woman over his own family." She started to close the door, then paused. "You want some advice, Nathan? Stop looking for them. They deserve better than what you've given them." The door slammed with such finality that Nathan stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance. He sat in his car outside Patricia's house for 20 minutes, watching the curtains for any sign of movement, any hint that his family might be hiding inside. But the windows remained dark and still, as empty as his house, as hollow as his chest. His next stop was Celeste's best friend Amanda's apartment downtown. Amanda had been maid of honor at their wedding, godmother to the twins, the person Celeste called when she needed to laugh or cry or simply be understood. If anyone knew where they'd gone, it would be Amanda. But when Nathan knocked on her door, Amanda's boyfriend Tyler answered instead. "She's not here," Tyler said, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by cold hostility. "And before you ask, no, I don't know when she'll be back. Funny thing though, she left this morning with a suitcase, said she was going to help a friend start a new life." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Nathan felt the world tilting beneath his feet. Where did they go? "I'm their father. I have rights." Rights. Tyler laughed harshly. You forfeited those rights when you decided another woman was more important than your family. Man, I used to respect you. Celeste would light up whenever she talked about you, about how you were her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. You know what she called you last time I saw her? The stranger who shares my name. The words cut deeper than Nathan thought possible. He had always prided himself on being a good husband, a present father. Yes, he worked long hours, yes, he traveled for business, but he provided for his family, gave them a beautiful home, paid for the girls' private lessons and summer camps. How had he become a stranger in his own life without even noticing? As Tyler closed the door, Nathan caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. Lily's favorite pink backpack sitting on Amanda's couch. They had been here recently, close enough that he could have reached out and touched his daughter's belongings, but still impossibly far away. Nathan spent the rest of the afternoon driving aimlessly through the city, checking every place his family had ever been. The park where they'd had countless Sunday picnics. The bookstore where Rose spent her allowance on astronomy guides. The ice cream shop where Lily always ordered strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. Each location mocked him with memories of happiness he'd somehow managed to destroy without even realizing it was happening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded him painfully of the sunset family photos they'd taken last summer, Nathan finally returned to the empty house. The silence felt different now, heavier, more permanent. This wasn't just an absence. This was an ending. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in his leather chair, staring at the family portrait that used to hang above the fireplace. Now only a pale rectangle on the wall marked where their smiling faces once looked down on him. In that moment, Nathan Cross began to understand that finding his family wouldn't be about searching the right places or asking the right people. It would be about becoming the right man. A man worthy of being found. But first, he would have to face the most terrifying truth of all. He didn't even know who that man was supposed to be. The conference room at Cross & Associates felt like a courtroom, and Nathan was clearly the defendant. He sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his usual position of power, but today the 12 faces staring back at him carried expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed fury. The Henderson merger, worth $47 million, lay in ruins because their lead negotiator had simply vanished during the most critical phase of talks. Explain to me, said Victoria Hartwell, the firm's senior partner, her silver hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her disapproval across her entire face, how our most reliable partner missed the biggest meeting of the quarter without so much as a phone call. Her voice carried the kind of controlled anger that was far more terrifying than shouting. Nathan tried to summon the smooth confidence that had built his reputation, but the words felt like ash in his mouth. I had a family emergency. My wife and daughters are apparently fine, interrupted James Morrison, the firm's managing director, sliding a tablet across the table. Because according to social media, Celeste was seen having lunch at the Garden Cafe yesterday with the girls, all 3 of them looking perfectly healthy and happy. Nathan's heart lurched. They were still in the city. Close enough to touch, yet impossibly distant. But as he stared at the photo, his daughters smiling over ice cream sundaes while Celeste looked relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in months, he realized something devastating. They weren't hiding from the world. They were hiding from him. The Hendersons pulled out, Victoria continued, her words falling like hammer blows. $47 million. Nathan. Gone. Because they said they couldn't trust a firm whose partners disappeared without explanation. They specifically mentioned that if we couldn't manage our own people, how could we manage their merger? Derek Ashworth, Nathan's business partner for 8 years, finally spoke from the far end of the table. I covered for you as long as I could, brother. Told them you had food poisoning, then a death in the family, then a car accident. But when you didn't show up for the signing, he spread his hands helplessly. They walked. And they took 3 other potential clients with them. The room felt like it was spinning. Nathan had built this firm from nothing, turned it into one of the most respected corporate advisory services in the region. These people weren't just colleagues, they were his professional family, the other pillar of his carefully constructed life. And now he was watching it crumble just as surely as his marriage had. "There's more," Victoria said, her tone suggesting the worst was yet to come. She opened a thick folder and spread photographs across the table. Nathan's blood turned to ice water. They were surveillance photos of him and Delphine, entering the Grandview Hotel, sharing intimate dinners at Le Bernardin, walking hand in hand through Central Park on afternoons when he was supposed to be in client meetings. "Henderson's due diligence team is thorough," James explained, his voice almost gentle now. "They investigate everyone they do business with. When they couldn't reach you yesterday, they dug deeper into your background. These photos were taken over the past 6 months, Nathan. 6 months of you billing client hours while you were otherwise occupied." Nathan felt his professional world imploding in real time. "Those were—" "I can explain the timeline. Some of those meetings—" "Stop," Derek said sharply. "Just stop. Do you know what this looks like? You've been committing time fraud, Nathan. Billing clients for hours you spent with your mistress. That's not just a breach of contract. It's criminal fraud." The word criminal hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Nathan had always prided himself on his integrity, his reputation for straight dealing. The idea that he could face criminal charges for his affair felt surreal, impossible. But as he looked around the table at the faces of people who had trusted him, people whose livelihoods depended on the firm's reputation, he began to understand the true scope of his destruction. "The board met this morning," Victoria announced, pulling out an official document. "By unanimous vote, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full audit of your billable hours and client interactions over the past year. Your access to firm accounts has been suspended. Your company credit cards have been cancelled. And your partnership share has been frozen until we can determine the full extent of the damage." Nathan felt the floor disappearing beneath him. "You can't do this. I built this firm. I brought in 70% of our major clients." "You built this firm," agreed Derek sadly. "And now you're destroying it. The Hendersons aren't the only ones asking questions, Nathan. Word travels fast in our industry. 3 other major clients have called requesting meetings to reassess their relationship with the firm. They want assurance that their lead advisor won't disappear during crucial negotiations." "I won't disappear again," Nathan protested desperately. "This was an isolated incident. My family situation is complicated right now, but I can handle both. I've always handled both." "That's exactly the problem," said Victoria, standing to signal the meeting's end. "You thought you could handle both. A marriage and an affair. Professional responsibilities and personal indulgences. But you can't have it all, Nathan. And your attempt to do so has cost us millions and put every job in this firm at risk." As his colleagues filed out of the conference room, avoiding his eyes like he was already a ghost, Nathan remained seated, staring at the photos scattered across the table. In every image, he and Delphine looked happy, carefree, lost in the bubble of their secret world. But now he could see what everyone else saw, a man who had gambled everything on a fantasy and lost it all. His phone buzzed with a text from Delphine. "Missing you already. When can we steal another afternoon? I have news to share, Red Heart." Nathan stared at the message, feeling nothing but a hollow ache where his heart used to be. The woman he had destroyed his life for wanted to steal more time, more lies, more moments that would cost him everything he had left. He turned off his phone and sat in the empty conference room as shadows lengthened through the windows, understanding for the first time that his affair hadn't been worth any of it. But understanding and fixing were 2 different things, and Nathan was beginning to suspect that the damage he'd done might be beyond repair. The penthouse apartment that had once been Nathan's sanctuary now felt like a prison of glass and steel. 24 hours had passed since his professional execution, and the silence from his suspended phone felt more deafening than any accusation. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, watching boats drift by like distant memories of a life that no longer belonged to him. The knock at his door came at precisely 9 a.m., sharp and authoritative. Nathan opened it to find two men in expensive suits flanked by a woman with a briefcase who looked like she could dismantle a corporate empire before lunch. The taller man flashed a badge that made Nathan's stomach drop. "Mr. Cross, I'm Detective Frank Williamson, Financial Crimes Division. This is Detective Rodriguez and Ms. Chen from the District Attorney's Office. We need to discuss some irregularities in your billing practices." Nathan's mouth went dry. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm on administrative leave to sort out some client timing issues, but there's nothing criminal." "May we come in?" Detective Williamson's tone made it clear this wasn't really a question. They swept past Nathan into his living room, their eyes taking inventory of every expensive piece of furniture, every luxury that now seemed to mock him. Ms. Chen opened her briefcase with surgical precision. "Mr. Cross, we've been conducting an investigation into time card fraud among several high-profile firms. Your name came up when Henderson Industries filed a complaint yesterday morning." She spread documents across his marble coffee table like a dealer laying out a losing hand. "These are your billing records for the past 18 months, cross-referenced with hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and surveillance footage from various establishments around the city." Nathan sank into his leather armchair, the same chair where he'd held his daughters for bedtime stories just weeks ago. Now it felt like an electric chair. "I want to call my lawyer." "That's your right," said Detective Rodriguez, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But before you do, let me paint you a picture of what we're looking at here. 43 billable hours charged to Henderson Industries during a 3-day period when hotel records show you never left the Grandview Hotel. 16 client dinners billed to Morrison and Associates when restaurant receipts show you dining with the same unidentified woman. And my personal favorite," he held up a photograph. 6 hours of emergency client consultation billed while you were shopping for jewelry at Cartier with your companion." The room spun slightly. Nathan gripped the armrests of his chair, feeling like he was falling from a great height. "Those were... I was handling client calls during those times. I can show you my phone records." Ms. Chen smiled, but it held no warmth. "We subpoenaed your phone records, Mr. Cross. Interesting reading. Turns out you made exactly 2 client-related calls during those 43 hours. The rest were either to your friend Delphine or to various luxury services arranging romantic surprises." She leaned forward. "We're looking at approximately $847,000 in fraudulent billing over 18 months. In New York State, that's a Class C felony with a potential sentence of 15 years. The number hit Nathan like a physical blow. $847,000. He had never thought of his time with Delphine in financial terms, had never calculated the cost of stolen afternoons and fabricated emergencies. But now, seeing it laid out in black and white, he understood why his colleagues had looked at him with such disgust. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had stolen from his clients, betrayed the trust of people who had paid premium rates for his expertise while he was buying lingerie for another woman. "There's more," Detective Williamson continued, producing a second folder. "Delphine Moreau, 28 years old. Professional companion with a very interesting client list. Seems she's been involved with several high-profile married men over the past 5 years, all of whom ended up in remarkably similar situations to yours. Expensive gifts, hotel stays, restaurant bills, all charged to their respective businesses as legitimate expenses." Nathan felt his world tilt on its axis. "Professional companion?" Ms. Chen nodded. The technical term would be high-end escort, though Ms. Moreau prefers lifestyle consultant. She specializes in what she calls executive relationships, long-term arrangements with successful married men who believe they're having a romantic affair when they're actually being systematically fleeced. She showed him a bank statement. Ms. Moreau has received gifts and cash totaling approximately $340,000 from you over the past 8 months. Money that, according to these records, came directly from funds you billed to your clients. Nathan stared at the numbers, remembering every expensive gift, every spontaneous weekend getaway, every time Delphine had mentioned financial troubles that he'd gallantly solved. The emerald necklace for her birthday. The down payment on her sick mother's medical bills. The designer clothes she needed for job interviews. Every sob story, every grateful kiss, every whispered declaration of love, all carefully orchestrated lies. We arrested Ms. Moreau this morning, Detective Rodriguez continued. She was quite cooperative once we explained her options. Seems she kept detailed records of all her clients, including recordings of some very interesting conversations about billing practices and tax evasion. He paused. Your name features prominently in those records, Mr. Cross. The apartment felt like it was closing in around him. Nathan had believed himself to be the architect of his own destruction, the master of his secret life. But now he understood that he had been nothing more than another mark, another wealthy fool who confused manipulation with affection. Delphine hadn't fallen in love with a married man. She had identified a target and executed a plan with devastating precision. What happens now? Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Chen stood, gathering her papers with efficient movements. Now, Mr. Cross, you have a choice. You can cooperate with our investigation, provide testimony about Ms. Moreau's activities, and work with us to make restitution to your defrauded clients. In which case, we might be able to work out a plea agreement that keeps you out of prison. She paused at the door. Or you can fight this, claim innocence, and take your chances with a jury who will see exactly what we've shown you today. After they left, Nathan stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of a success that had been built on lies and was now crumbling into dust. His family was gone. His career was destroyed. His freedom hung by a thread. And the woman he had sacrificed everything for had never existed at all. For the first time since finding the empty house, Nathan Cross began to cry. The law office of Brennan and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the belly of storm clouds gathering over Manhattan. Nathan sat in the waiting room, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through a magazine without seeing the words. 3 days had passed since the detective's visit, 3 days of sleepless nights and unanswered calls to lawyers who suddenly seemed too busy to take his case. When Margaret Brennan finally emerged from her office, Nathan was struck by how ordinary she looked, mid-50s, graying hair in a practical bob, wire-rimmed glasses that gave her the appearance of a librarian rather than one of the city's most feared criminal defense attorneys. But her handshake was firm, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had seen every type of human wreckage and knew how to sort the salvageable from the lost. Mr. Cross, she said, leading him into her office lined with law books and case files. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence the DA's office provided. I'll be direct with you, this is not a case I would normally take. She settled behind her desk, studying him with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a patient. The evidence against you is overwhelming, the financial damage is substantial, and frankly, you're not a sympathetic defendant. Nathan felt his last hope beginning to crumble. Ms. Brennan, I know how this looks, but I can explain. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. No, she cut him off firmly. Don't explain anything to me yet. First, let me tell you what I see when I look at your case. She opened a thick folder. I see a successful man who threw away his family and career for what he believed was love. I see someone who was professionally manipulated by an expert con artist. And I see a man who is about to lose everything unless he makes some very difficult choices very quickly. She leaned back in her chair. The question isn't whether you're guilty. You are. The question is whether you're willing to take responsibility for your actions and work toward making amends, or whether you're going to continue believing you're the victim of circumstances beyond your control. Nathan swallowed hard. What are my options? Limited, she replied bluntly. The DA's office is offering a plea agreement. You cooperate fully with their investigation into Delphine Moreau's operation, provide testimony and evidence about her methods, make full restitution to your defrauded clients, that's the $847,000 plus interest, and serve 18 months in minimum security prison with 3 years of supervised probation. The room seemed to tilt. Prison. The alternative is going to trial, where you'll face a potential 15-year sentence if convicted. And Mr. Cross, with the evidence they have, conviction is virtually certain. Margaret leaned forward. But here's what concerns me more than your legal troubles. Have you given any thought to your family during this process? Nathan felt a sharp pain in his chest. They won't see me. They won't take my calls. I don't even know where they are. Because you destroyed their trust so completely that they feel safer hiding from you than facing you. Her words were delivered without malice, but they cut deep. I spoke with Patricia Morrison this morning. Yes, your sister-in-law. She's not my client, but she agreed to take a call because she's concerned about those little girls. Nathan's heart lurched. Are they okay? Are Lily and Rose? They're traumatized, Margaret said simply. Lily has started having nightmares. Rose has stopped eating properly. They keep asking their mother if the bad man who looks like Daddy is going to find them. Do you understand what your choices have done to your children? The words hit Nathan like physical blows. In all his self-pity and desperation to fix his own situation, he had barely considered how his actions had affected his daughter's sense of security, their understanding of love and trust. They weren't just missing their father, they were afraid of him. There's more, Margaret continued. Celeste has been in contact with several support groups for families affected by financial fraud. She's learned that you weren't Delphine's first victim, and she's connected with other wives whose husbands fell into similar traps. She's not hiding from you out of spite, Mr. Cross. She's protecting herself and your daughters from someone she no longer recognizes. Nathan buried his face in his hands. How do I fix this? How do I make this right? You start by accepting responsibility, Margaret replied. Not just legal responsibility, emotional responsibility. You need to understand that your family doesn't owe you forgiveness. They don't owe you a chance to explain. And they certainly don't owe you their trust just because you're sorry now. She pulled out another document. Patricia mentioned that Celeste is considering relocating permanently. There's a job offer in Seattle, a fresh start where the girls won't have to worry about running into you or hearing whispers about their father's scandal. She hasn't made a decision yet, but she's protecting her options. The thought of his daughters moving 3,000 miles away felt like a death sentence. I'll fight it. I'll go to court for custody rights. With what standing? Margaret's voice was sharp. You're about to be a convicted felon, Mr. Cross. You have no job, no income, and no credibility. What court is going to award custody to a man who chose an escort over his family and committed fraud to pay for the privilege? Nathan felt the walls of his life closing in completely. Every decision he had made, every lie he had told, every moment he had chosen his own gratification over his family's well-being had led to this moment where he had no power, no options, and no one to blame but himself. But, Margaret continued, her voice softening slightly, there is something you can do. Not to get your family back. That ship has likely sailed. But to begin the long process of becoming a man who might someday deserve their forgiveness, even if he never receives it. She handed him the plea agreement. You can take responsibility. You can cooperate with the authorities. You can work to make sure that Delphine Moreau never destroys another family. You can serve your time, pay your debts, and start the difficult work of understanding how you became someone capable of such devastating selfishness. Nathan stared at the document, seeing not just legal language but the roadmap to the most difficult journey of his life, the path from the man who had destroyed everything to someone who might eventually deserve to call himself a father again. "And if I do all that?" he asked quietly. Margaret's expression was gentler now, but still unflinchingly honest. "Then maybe years from now, your daughters will look back and see that their father finally did one thing right." He stopped running from the truth and started facing the consequences of his choices. Nathan picked up the pen, understanding that signing this document meant accepting the end of everything he had been and the beginning of a journey toward who he might become. The county courthouse basement felt like a different world from the marble halls upstairs where corporate deals were struck and civil disputes resolved. Down here, in the bowels of the building where plea agreements were processed and futures were decided, fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the air carried the scent of disinfectant mixed with desperation. Nathan sat at a scarred wooden table, his once pristine appearance now showing the wear of sleepless nights and mounting stress. Across from him sat Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her early 40s whose reputation for extracting information from white-collar criminals was legendary. Beside her, Detective Williamson arranged recording equipment with the methodical precision of someone who had done this countless times before. The court stenographer settled into her corner, fingers poised over keys that would capture every word of Nathan's confession. "Before we begin," Ada Walsh said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to holding people's futures in her hands, "I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to, Mr. Cross. You're not just pleading guilty to fraud charges. You're becoming a key witness in a much larger investigation into organized financial manipulation targeting high-net-worth individuals." Nathan nodded, though his throat felt too tight to speak. The plea agreement sat before him like a roadmap to hell, but it was the only road that didn't lead to complete destruction. "Tell me about your first encounter with Delphine Moreau," Detective Williamson prompted, activating the recording device. Nathan closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember details he'd preferred to romanticize. "It was at the Meridian Hotel bar, 14 months ago. I was there for a client dinner that got cancelled last minute. She approached me, said I looked like I could use some company." The words felt like glass in his throat. "She was beautiful, sophisticated. Said she was an art consultant working with private collectors." "Did you tell her you were married?" Ada Walsh asked. "Not immediately. I removed my wedding ring before she came over." Nathan felt shame burn through him as he admitted this premeditation. "I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I was just enjoying conversation with an attractive woman. But I knew what I was doing." Detective Williamson made notes. "When did the financial arrangements begin?" "The third time we met. She mentioned her grandmother needed surgery, that insurance wasn't covering everything. $15,000. Nathan remembered how easily the lie had been swallowed, how good it had felt to be needed, to be someone's hero. "I wrote a check from my personal account that night." "But that wasn't the end of it," Ada Walsh prompted. "No. There was always something. Her car broke down. Her rent was due. Her cousin needed bail money. And I—" Nathan paused, struggling with the humiliation of his own gullibility. "I wanted to be the man who could fix everything for her. It made me feel powerful, important, more important than I felt at home." The questioning continued for 3 hours, each answer peeling away another layer of Nathan's self-deception. They walked through every fraudulent billing entry, every fictitious client meeting, every moment when he had chosen to steal time and money from his professional responsibilities to fund his fantasy relationship. "Let's talk about the emotional manipulation," Ada Walsh said, consulting her notes. "According to our investigation, Ms. Moreau employed specific psychological tactics. Can you describe her methods?" Nathan felt his chest tighten. "She made me feel like I was rescuing her. Like she was this delicate, beautiful creature who had been hurt by other men but could trust me. She would cry when she talked about her past, tell me I was different, that I understood her in ways no one else did." He paused, remembering the intoxicating feeling of being idealized. She made me believe I was the hero of her story. Did she ever threaten to tell your wife about the relationship? She didn't have to. The threat was always implied. She would mention how devastated families could be when secrets came out, how wives sometimes took everything in divorce proceedings. But she framed it as concern for me, as protecting our future together. Nathan realized how carefully orchestrated every conversation had been. She was always 3 steps ahead, anticipating my concerns before I voiced them. Detective Williamson leaned forward. "We need you to walk through the financial records, Mr. Cross. Every payment, every gift, every expense you charged to clients while you were with her. This is crucial for building our case against her operation." For the next 2 hours, they dissected Nathan's financial life with surgical precision. Bank statements, credit card records, hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, a paper trail that documented his systematic betrayal of everyone who had trusted him. Each entry told the story of a man who had gradually lost sight of every moral boundary he had once respected. The Cartier bracelet, Ada Walsh noted, highlighting an entry. $47,000, billed as client entertainment expense to Morrison Industries. But security footage shows you shopping alone with Ms. Moreau on a Tuesday afternoon when you claim to be in depositions. Nathan nodded miserably. She said it reminded her of her grandmother's bracelet, the one she'd had to sell for medical bills. "I wanted to give her something beautiful, something that would show her how much I—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "How much you what, Mr. Cross? How much I loved her." The words tasted bitter now. "I thought I loved her. But looking back, I think I just loved the way she made me feel about myself." Ada Walsh exchanged glances with Detective Williamson. "That's an important distinction, Mr. Cross. And it's one that will help us demonstrate to other victims that they weren't just cheating on their spouses, they were being systematically manipulated by a professional criminal operation." As the recording session concluded, Nathan felt hollow but strangely relieved. For 14 months, he had carried the weight of his lies, the constant fear of discovery, the exhausting effort of maintaining his double life. Now, with everything exposed and documented, there was a perverse freedom in having no secrets left to protect. "What happens next?" Nathan asked as the equipment was packed away. "Next," Ada Walsh replied, "you help us build a case that will prevent Delphine Moreau from destroying any more families. You testify before a grand jury. You help us understand how someone like you, successful, intelligent, seemingly stable, could be so completely deceived." She gathered her files, then looked at Nathan with something that might have been sympathy. "And then, Mr. Cross, you serve your time and begin the much harder work of figuring out how to live with what you've done. Because the legal consequences are just the beginning. The real punishment will be facing yourself every day for the rest of your life, knowing that you had everything and threw it away for a lie." As Nathan left the courthouse, he understood that his confession was more than just cooperation with law enforcement. It was the first honest conversation he'd had with anyone, including himself, in over a year. And it was the beginning of a journey that would either destroy him completely or teach him what it meant to be a man worthy of redemption. The visiting room at Rikers Island felt like a sterile purgatory, all beige walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. Nathan sat across from his court-appointed counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, a woman whose calm demeanor and steady gaze suggested she had heard every possible variation of human failure. Between them lay a stack of psychological evaluation forms and a recording device that would capture Nathan's first honest assessment of his mental state in years. "Tell me about your childhood relationship with your father," Dr. Martinez began, her pen poised over a yellow legal pad. Nathan had been dreading this question since his arrest, knowing that every family therapy cliché would be dragged into the light and examined for clues about how he had become a man capable of such spectacular self-destruction. "He was never home," Nathan replied, the words feeling rehearsed even though he'd never spoken them aloud. "Richard Cross, investment banker, master of the universe. I saw him maybe an hour a day between the time he got home and when I went to bed. Weekends were for golf with clients or emergency calls from Tokyo or London. Dr. Martinez made notes. How did that affect your sense of what it meant to be a successful man? Nathan felt something twist in his chest. I learned that success meant being indispensable to everyone except your family. That love was something you earned through achievement, not something you deserved just for existing. He paused, recognizing the pattern for the first time. I learned that a man's worth was measured by how much he could provide, how many problems he could solve, how many people depended on him. Is that how you felt with Delphine? Indispensable. The question hit like a physical blow. Yes. God, yes. She needed me in ways Celeste never did. Celeste was independent, capable, strong. She built her own career, managed our household, raised our daughters with minimal input from me. I was proud of her strength, but Nathan struggled to find words for the shameful truth. But it also made me feel unnecessary. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. Unnecessary how? Like I was just the paycheck, the provider. I'd come home from work and everything would already be handled. Dinner made, homework done, baths finished. Celeste was so competent that I started to feel like a stranger visiting my own life. Nathan's voice cracked slightly. Delphine made me feel vital. Like I was the hero of the story instead of just a supporting character. But that feeling required constant feeding, didn't it? Constant proof of your importance. Nathan nodded, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. Every crisis she had was another opportunity for me to be needed. Every financial emergency was another chance to prove my value. I became addicted to being her salvation. The sessions continued over the following weeks, each one peeling away another layer of self-deception. Nathan learned about narcissistic supply, about emotional manipulation, about the psychology of men who abandon stable relationships for the intoxicating feeling of being worshipped. But more importantly, he began to understand his own role in his destruction. You weren't just a victim of Delphine's manipulation, Dr. Martinez explained during their 5th session. You were an active participant in your own deception. You wanted to believe you were special, that normal rules didn't apply to you, that you could have both the stability of marriage and the excitement of an affair without consequences. The truth settled over Nathan like a heavy blanket. He had convinced himself that he was a good man making one mistake, but the reality was more complex and more damning. He had systematically betrayed every person who depended on him because it fed his ego to do so. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings moved forward with mechanical precision. The grand jury indicted Delphine Moreau on 17 counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Nathan's testimony had been crucial in establishing the pattern of her crimes, connecting her to a network of similar operators who targeted successful married men across the Northeast. But each victory for justice felt hollow against the backdrop of his own devastation. The hardest moment came when Patricia Morrison visited him in jail, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "They're moving to Seattle," she said without preamble. "Celeste got the job offer. They leave next month." Nathan felt his world collapse inward. "How are the girls?" "Lily asks about you sometimes. Rose doesn't." Patricia's words were clinical, factual. "Celeste is in therapy. The girls are in therapy. The whole family is working through the trauma you caused. But they need distance, Nathan. They need to heal without worrying about whether you're going to show up demanding forgiveness." "I want to write them letters," Nathan said desperately. "I want them to know how sorry I am." "No." Patricia's voice was firm. "You don't get to make yourself feel better by forcing your guilt onto your children. Your daughters are 7 and 9 years old. They don't need to carry the weight of your apologies. They need to remember what it feels like to be safe." After Patricia left, Nathan sat in his cell staring at the gray walls, understanding for the first time that his journey toward redemption couldn't begin with his family's forgiveness. It had to begin with accepting that he might never see his daughters again, might never have the chance to explain or apologize or prove that he had changed. Dr. Martinez visited him the day before his sentencing hearing. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" she asked. "Scared," Nathan admitted. "But also relieved? For the first time in my life, I'm going to face the consequences of my actions instead of trying to manage or manipulate the outcome." "That's growth," she acknowledged. "Real growth. But Nathan, I need you to understand something important. Taking responsibility for your actions is just the beginning. The real work, becoming a man worthy of the family you lost, that work will take years. And it may not lead to the reconciliation you want." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of that truth settle into his bones. "I know. But I have to try. Not for them, for me. Because the man who destroyed his family for an illusion doesn't deserve to exist anymore." As he prepared for sentencing, Nathan Cross understood that he was facing more than just 18 months in prison. He was facing the complete dismantling of everything he had believed about himself and the terrifying possibility of rebuilding from absolutely nothing. But for the first time since finding that empty house, he felt something that might have been hope. Not hope for his family's return, but hope that he might eventually become someone who deserved to call himself a father, even if his children never knew it. The sentencing hearing arrived on a gray February morning when snow fell like ash over the courthouse steps. Nathan Cross stood before Judge Eleanor Hartwick, a woman whose 30 years on the bench had given her the ability to see through every excuse and justification that desperate men could manufacture. The courtroom was nearly empty, just the court staff, Ada Walsh, Margaret Brennan, and a single reporter from the Financial Crimes Beat who had been following the case. "Mr. Cross," Judge Hartwick began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you have pleaded guilty to charges of wire fraud, theft of services, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Before I impose sentence, I want to hear from you directly. Not through your attorney, not through prepared statements, but in your own words. Do you understand the gravity of what you have done?" Nathan stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. 18 months of legal proceedings had stripped away every defense mechanism he had ever possessed, leaving him raw and exposed. "Yes, Your Honor. I destroyed my family's trust, betrayed my client's confidence, and committed crimes that I spent months convincing myself weren't really crimes at all." "Elaborate," the judge commanded. Nathan took a shaky breath. "I told myself that I was a good man making one mistake, that I was the victim of manipulation, that somehow the woman I was involved with was responsible for my choices. But the truth is that every lie I told, every dollar I stole, every moment I chose my own gratification over my responsibilities, those were my decisions. Mine alone." Judge Hartwick studied him with calculating eyes. "The victim impact statements in this case make for sobering reading, Mr. Cross. Your former clients have suffered significant financial hardship. Your business partners have lost their reputations along with their livelihoods. Your family has been forced to relocate to escape the scandal you created. What do you say to these people whose lives you've damaged?" Nathan felt tears threatening, but forced himself to maintain eye contact. "I can't undo what I've done. I can't give back the sense of security I stole from my daughters or the trust one destroyed in my marriage. I can't restore the professional relationships I poisoned or return the 18 months of productivity I stole from my clients." His voice cracked. "But I can promise that the man who committed these crimes is gone. I've spent every day since my arrest trying to understand how I became someone capable of such devastating selfishness, and I'm committed to making sure that person never exists again." Pretty words, Mr. Cross. But I've heard pretty words from hundreds of defendants who returned to my courtroom within 5 years for similar offenses. Judge Hartwick leaned forward. "What makes you different?" Nathan considered the question carefully. "Because I've lost everything that mattered to me, and I've learned that I deserved to lose it. My wife and daughters aren't waiting for me to get out of prison. My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. I have nothing left to protect except my own integrity, and that's something I have to rebuild from scratch." The judge was silent for a long moment, consulting the sentencing guidelines and psychological evaluations. "Mr. Cross, the prosecution has recommended a sentence of 18 months in federal minimum security prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and full restitution to your victims. Your cooperation in the investigation of Delphine Moreau's criminal enterprise has been noted and appreciated by law enforcement." Nathan held his breath. "However," Judge Hartwick continued, "I am concerned about the systematic nature of your crimes and the profound impact on innocent parties. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, during which time you will be required to perform 500 hours of community service with organizations that assist families affected by financial fraud." She paused. "Additionally, you will pay full restitution of $847,000 plus interest to your victims, and you are permanently barred from working in any financial advisory capacity." The gavel fell with the finality of a coffin nail. 24 months. 2 years in prison. Nathan felt his knees buckle slightly, but Margaret Brennan's steadying hand on his arm kept him upright. 2 years to think about every choice he had made, every person he had hurt, every moment when he could have chosen differently. As the bailiffs approached with handcuffs, Nathan turned to look at the empty gallery one last time, half hoping to see a familiar face. But there was no one. His family was 3,000 miles away, building new lives that didn't include him. His former colleagues had distanced themselves to protect their own reputations. He was completely alone, facing the consequences of his actions without the buffer of wealth or status or professional connections that had once made him feel untouchable. The transport van to federal prison was cramped and cold, filled with men whose stories he would learn over the coming months. White-collar criminals like himself, drug dealers, embezzlers, tax evaders, all of them united by the common experience of having their freedom stripped away because of choices they couldn't undo. As the van pulled away from the courthouse, Nathan stared out the small window at the city where he had built and destroyed everything that mattered to him. The buildings grew smaller and more distant, like his old life receding into memory. He thought about Lily and Rose, wondering if they still remembered his voice, if they ever asked about him, if Celeste had found a way to explain why their father had chosen a stranger over his own family. The federal minimum security facility in upstate New York looked like a community college campus, all low brick buildings and walking paths bordered by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. As Nathan was processed through intake, fingerprinted, photographed, issued standard-issue clothing and bedding, he felt the last vestiges of his former identity being stripped away. Nathan Cross, successful corporate advisor, devoted husband and father, pillar of the community, that man was gone. In his place stood inmate number 47382, a middle-aged convicted felon with 24 months to figure out who he might become when he finally earned the right to rejoin the world. His cellmate was a tax attorney named Robert Chen who had embezzled client funds to support a gambling addiction. "First time inside?" Robert asked as Nathan arranged his few possessions in the small locker beside his narrow bunk. "Yes," Nathan replied. "It gets easier," Robert said quietly. "The shame, the regret, the constant replaying of every stupid decision, it gets easier to carry after a while. But it never goes away completely. And that's probably good. Means we might actually learn something from this." As Nathan lay on his bunk that first night, listening to the sounds of men whose lives had imploded in ways both similar and different from his own, he understood that his real punishment wasn't the loss of freedom or comfort. It was the knowledge that somewhere in Seattle, his daughters were falling asleep without wondering whether their father would ever come home, because they had already learned to live without him. The man who had once believed he could have everything had discovered that losing everything was just the beginning of understanding what anything was worth. 22 months into his sentence, Nathan Cross had developed routines that would have been unrecognizable to his former self. He woke at 5:30 a.m. without an alarm, made his narrow bunk with military precision, and walked the prison yard for an hour before breakfast, watching the sunrise paint the razor wire in shades of gold and amber. The man who had once measured success in stock portfolios and quarterly reports now found meaning in small consistencies. The way his cellmate Robert had stopped having panic attacks about his ruined law practice, the gradual improvement in his own handwriting as he worked through anger management workbooks, the fact that he could sleep through the night without dreaming about empty houses. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered with the stack of legal documents and prison administrative notices that comprised most inmates' mail. Nathan almost didn't recognize the return address at first, a law office in Seattle he'd never heard of. But when he opened the envelope and saw the familiar handwriting, his hands began to shake so violently he nearly dropped the paper. "Nathan," the letter began, and seeing his name in Celeste's careful script after nearly 2 years of silence felt like a physical blow. "Patricia gave me your address. I know you're not allowed to contact us, and I'm not writing to invite that contact. But there are things you need to know, and I've decided you have the right to know them, even if you don't have the right to respond." Nathan sat on his bunk, aware that his cellmate was pretending not to watch him read what was obviously a deeply personal communication. The letter continued in Celeste's measured, thoughtful tone, the same voice that had once discussed grocery lists and parent-teacher conferences and weekend plans. "Lily started 5th grade this year. She's on the soccer team and learning violin, though she's terrible at it and doesn't seem to care. She's made friends easily here, which surprised me. I thought the move would be harder for her, but children are more resilient than we give them credit for. She asks about you sometimes, usually when she sees other kids with their fathers at games or school events. I tell her that you're working on becoming a better person, which seems to satisfy her for now." Nathan felt tears threatening and forced himself to keep reading. "Rose is in 7th grade and has discovered astronomy club. Do you remember how she used to drag that telescope you bought her onto the balcony every clear night? She's building a model of the solar system for the science fair, and her teacher says she has real aptitude for physics. She doesn't ask about you anymore, but sometimes I catch her looking at old family photos when she thinks I'm not watching. She's old enough to understand more about what happened, and I think that makes it harder for her to reconcile the father she remembered with the man who made those choices." The words cut deeper than any sentencing statement or victim impact letter Nathan had endured during his trial. His daughters were growing up, reaching milestones and discovering passions and navigating the complexities of adolescence without him. Lily was learning to play violin badly and loving it anyway. Rose was contemplating the vastness of space while he contemplated the 4 walls of a prison cell. "I'm dating someone," the letter continued, and Nathan felt his world shift slightly on its axis. "His name is Michael. He's a teacher at Rose's school, divorced, with a teenage son. The girls like him. He's patient with Lily's endless questions and doesn't try to compete with Rose's intellect. He doesn't try to replace you because he understands that's impossible and inappropriate. But he's showing them what it looks like when a man keeps his promises, when someone shows up consistently, when love doesn't come with conditions or secrets." Nathan closed his eyes, trying to process the complex emotions flooding through him. Jealousy, certainly, but also something that might have been relief. His daughters were seeing what healthy relationships looked like. They were learning that men could be trustworthy, that love didn't have to be complicated by lies and betrayal. "I'm not writing to hurt you," Celeste continued, as if she could sense his emotional turmoil through the paper. "I'm writing because Dr. Hoffman, my therapist, suggested that part of my healing process involves clear communication rather than leaving things unsaid. So here's what I need you to know. I forgive you, but I don't trust you. I wish you well, but I don't want you in our lives. I hope you're becoming the man you should have been, but that man doesn't get to undo the damage the old you caused." The letter went on to describe practical matters. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, the house in New York had been sold to pay restitution to Nathan's victims, Celeste's new job at a non-profit that helped families affected by financial crime. She wrote about therapy sessions and support groups, about the slow process of rebuilding her sense of self-worth after being betrayed by the person she had trusted most. "The girls and I are building something new," she concluded. "Something stable and honest and safe. I know that probably sounds like punishment to you, knowing that we're happy without you. But Nathan, for the first time in years, I'm not afraid. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop, not wondering what secrets you're keeping, not feeling like I have to earn love through perfection. The girls are learning what it feels like to live without the underlying tension that filled our house during those last months of your affair. Nathan read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word, every subtle inflection of Celeste's voice that came through even in written form. When he finally looked up, he found Robert watching him with concern. Bad news or good news? Robert asked gently. Nathan considered the question. His family was thriving without him. His daughters were growing into remarkable young women who would probably remember him as a cautionary tale rather than a father. His ex-wife had found love with a man who possessed all the qualities Nathan had convinced himself were unnecessary in marriage. Both, Nathan replied finally. They're okay. They're more than okay. They're happy. And that hurts. It should hurt, Nathan said, understanding something fundamental about his journey toward redemption. For 2 years, I've been focused on my own pain, my own loss, my own need for forgiveness. But their happiness doesn't depend on my redemption. It exists in spite of me, not because of me. That night, Nathan lay awake thinking about Lily's violin lessons and Rose's telescope and Celeste's newfound sense of safety. He thought about Michael, this patient teacher who was showing his daughters what reliable love looked like. And for the first time since his arrest, Nathan felt something that wasn't grief or shame or desperate hope for reconciliation. He felt genuine happiness for the people he had hurt most. Not the performative happiness of someone seeking forgiveness, but the authentic joy that comes from loving someone enough to want their well-being even when it doesn't include you. It was, Nathan realized, the first truly selfless emotion he had experienced in years. And it felt like the beginning of becoming a man who might someday deserve to call himself their father, even if they never knew it. The halfway house in Albany sat on a tree-lined street that could have been anywhere in Middle America, its modest brick facade offering no hint of the broken lives being rebuilt within its walls. Nathan Cross stood at the front door with a single duffel bag containing everything he owned: prison-issued clothing, a few paperback books, the letter from Celeste that he had read so many times the creases were beginning to tear. After 24 months in federal prison, the simple act of turning a doorknob felt foreign and significant. "Welcome to Riverside House," said Janet Morrison, the facility director whose matter-of-fact demeanor suggested she had seen every variety of human wreckage and knew which pieces could be salvaged. "You'll share a room with Marcus Thompson, tax evasion, 6 months left on his supervised release. He works at the automotive shop downtown and attends NA meetings 3 times a week. Good man to learn from." Nathan's room was spartanly furnished but clean: 2 single beds, 2 small dressers, a window that looked out on a courtyard where other residents sat reading or talking quietly. It was luxury compared to federal prison, but Nathan found himself missing the rigid structure of incarceration. Here, he would have to make choices about how to spend his time, how to structure his days, who to become without the safety net of enforced routine. His first week of freedom was a cascade of small humiliations that reminded him how completely his old life had been erased. The employment counselor at the state reintegration office spoke to him with the weary patience of someone who had helped countless felons discover that their college degrees and professional experience meant nothing with a criminal record. "With fraud convictions, you're barred from most financial services," she explained, highlighting entries on a thick manual. "Banking, insurance, investment advising, accounting, all off limits. We'll focus on manual labor, food service, maybe eventually some non-profit work if you can demonstrate sustained rehabilitation." Nathan spent his days walking the unfamiliar streets of Albany, filling out job applications that asked about criminal history and watching potential employers' expressions change when they read his answers. The manager at a local hardware store studied Nathan's application with obvious confusion. "Says here you used to make mid-6 figures as a corporate advisor. Why do you want to stock shelves for minimum wage?" "Because it's honest work," Nathan replied, the words feeling strange but true in his mouth. "And I need to learn how to earn trust again, starting with small things." The job came with a uniform shirt, a time clock, and the kind of physical exhaustion Nathan hadn't experienced since college summer jobs. He spent 8 hours a day lifting boxes, organizing inventory, helping customers find screws and paint and garden hoses. His hands grew calloused, his back ached, and he discovered an unexpected satisfaction in the simplicity of completing concrete tasks without moral complexity. 3 months into his halfway house residency, Nathan began attending meetings of a support group for parents estranged from their children due to criminal behavior. The group met in the basement of a Methodist church, 12 folding chairs arranged in a circle under fluorescent lights that hummed like mechanical prayers. The other participants carried stories that were variations on his own theme: fathers who had chosen addiction over responsibility, mothers who had embezzled from their children's accounts, parents whose crimes had destroyed their family's sense of safety. "The hardest part," said Maria Santos, whose drug trafficking conviction had cost her custody of her 3 young sons, "is accepting that loving them means letting them go. I spent 2 years in my cell planning what I'd say when I got out, how I'd prove I'd changed. But real love means wanting them to be happy and safe, even if that means being happy and safe without me." Nathan found himself nodding, thinking of Lily's violin lessons and Rose's astronomy club and Michael's patient presence in their lives. "I used to think redemption meant earning forgiveness," he said during one meeting. "But maybe redemption is just becoming someone worthy of forgiveness, whether you receive it or not." The group leader, a former social worker named Dr. Amanda Chen who specialized in family reconciliation, challenged Nathan's perspective. "What does worthy mean to you now?" Nathan considered the question. "It means keeping promises, even small ones. It means showing up consistently for people who depend on you. It means choosing other people's well-being over your own immediate gratification." He paused. "It means becoming someone my daughters could respect, even if they never know who I became." As his halfway house residency neared its end, Nathan faced the prospect of complete independence for the first time since his arrest. He had saved enough money from his hardware store job to rent a studio apartment 6 blocks from work. The space was tiny, smaller than his former walk-in closet, but it was his, earned through honest labor and careful budgeting. On his last night at Riverside House, Nathan sat in the courtyard reading a letter he had written but would never send. It was addressed to Lily and Rose, filled with apologies he had no right to offer and explanations that would only burden them with his guilt. As he finished reading, he struck a match and watched the pages curl into ash, releasing his need for their forgiveness into the evening air. Marcus Thompson found him there an hour later, staring at the sky through the maple branches overhead. "Feels different on the outside," Marcus observed, settling into the chair beside Nathan. "Scarier," Nathan admitted. "In prison, I knew exactly who I was supposed to be. Out here, I have to choose every day." "That's the point," Marcus replied. "Choice. Real choice, not the fake choice between lying and getting caught. You get to decide what kind of man you want to be, and then you get to prove it through your actions." Nathan nodded, understanding that his journey was far from over. He would spend the rest of his life earning back the right to call himself a good man, knowing he might never see his daughters again, but hoping they would somehow sense that their father had finally learned what it meant to love them properly, from a distance, without conditions, without expecting anything in return. The next morning, Nathan Cross walked out of Riverside House carrying the same duffel bag he had brought 24 months earlier. But inside him was something he had never possessed during his years of wealth and status and professional success: the quiet strength that comes from accepting responsibility for your failures and choosing to build something real from the ruins. He was alone, but he was no longer lost. He was free, and for the first time in his life, he deserved to be. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.